Welcome to the next video in our ongoing mixing a song from beginning to end series. In the last video, we looked at organizing our session, naming our tracks, creating groups, bouncing down to audio as if you were sending it to a mixing engineer just to stay organized and save that precious CPU space. And in this video, we're going to dive deeper into setting up our effects, some pro tips, and some routing to actually get ready to start mixing. So if you're ready, let's jump in. Hey yo, it's Alex from Metamind Music, and as always with this channel, it's my mission to help you, the artist, produce themselves by developing their mindset, expanding their creativity, and connecting to their music in a deeper way. And let's go ahead and transition to the DAW and where we left off last time. So last time we actually made some groups and organized our session. If you haven't checked out that video yet, I will link it in the card above. Definitely check it out before this one. And in this one, we're going to continue and we're going to go ahead and set up a few crucial tools as well as our routing for mixing so that when we start to get into the mixing process, all of this stuff is set up and we can stay in flow state instead of having to set all of this stuff up while you're mixing and interrupting your flow. All right, so the first thing to look at is to set up your routing. So one thing that you want to make sure you do is to create groups, which we did in the last video, to enable you to process several tracks at the same time, as well as control the volume of several tracks together. Okay, so I have a bass group, which has a bass heavy guitar and a bass guitar vibe. It's actually a synth, but it sounds like a bass guitar. And I have different sounds for different parts of this song, and they are both grouped together in this group. And in this group, we can change the volume, we can add processing, whatever it is, and it will affect everything in that group. Next, we have our drums. So we have kick, snare, hi-hat, crash, ride, tom 1 and tom 2, all grouped together into our drum group with a few plugins on top. Then we have our guitar. So all of our guitar tracks are grouped together here, including the solo and some trippy effects. Then we have some more melodic instruments, some keys, which I've grouped together here, as well as our synths. We have a few synth tracks going on. And finally, we have a couple string tracks that are grouped together. So right off the bat, that's great. That is organized. The next thing that I want to bring your attention to is what are called return tracks. So we can have these tracks, which are called return tracks or auxiliary tracks, where you can have an effect on this track and send signal from any of your tracks in your arrangement here to get affected by any of these tracks. So let me show you an example. I have this Valhalla Supermassive reverb, which is a free plugin. So if you don't have this one, definitely grab it. And it's this amazing granular textured reverb. And throughout the song, I'm sending different tracks at different points of the song to this reverb to get that extra shimmer, that extra kind of spacey vibe. And it's living on a separate track so we can process the effect differently than the source track. So that's the reasoning why you would want to use a return track, is that if you want to EQ your reverb, you can do it without having to EQ the source as well, which is a very good move to do. So let's actually find a part where there's some signal being sent here to audition it. So let's go to verse 2. Let's solo this. So we can hear that some of this guitar is being sent. This main guitar is being sent from here. Let me switch views so you can see it in a different way. So in Mixer View in Ableton, you can see that we have sends corresponding to the amount of returns we have. So this main guitar is being sent to this crazy reverb. And when we solo this reverb, we can hear the effect only. Right, let's throw in the original guitar. Right, so I kind of came up with this as I was creating the song and arranging it. It's a move I like to do, is just have some crazy effect and automate sends or just send stuff. And we have a bunch of this stuff. A bunch of the guitars are going there, and it just adds this crazy texture. And we're probably going to tweak this as we move forward. The other one that we have set up here is this delay. So I believe this is for if we go to the solo section. So let's open up these keys, and then we have this arpeggiator. I believe this arpeggiator is being automated to this return track. So let's go ahead and solo this and the arp, and let's listen for when it automates to this delay. So notice how the send B is automatically going up, and then it's getting sent to that reverb for specific parts of this kind of arpeggio riff. Right, some extra trippiness. So that's the only two returns I have going on right now. And I would say that these are a little bit more compositional effects. Like I came up with this while composing. But now let's set up a few other return tracks that are kind of tried and true for mixing purposes. And of course, you can develop your own go-to effects, and they will change song by song. But there are a few things that I typically go for. So let's actually do that. So I'm just going to create a return track. And I'm going to color it white because I just like to color those white. Rename this snare. So let's rename this snare verb. And I'm just going to go ahead and drag. I'm going to go to my audio effects, and then we're going to go to reverb and resonance. And I'm just going to grab a straight up reverb. Ableton's reverb is great. And we're on eco mode to save CPU, but before exporting the final project, I will turn this up to high to get the best quality. But for now, we'll leave it on eco. And I won't go too deep into all the settings here, but I'm just going to do a high cut and a low cut. I'm going to turn off the spin. I'm going to turn off the chorus. I'm going to mess with this diffusion network a little bit so that the low end frequencies get reflected a little bit quicker than the high frequencies. So this will kind of give you a little bit of a gymnasium feel. And then we want the pre-delay to be a little bit shorter because I'm kind of going for a shorter sound, a shorter reverb tail. Size can definitely come down. Stereo can come way down. And we're going to make the dry wet 100. The scale could come down as well. Decay time, again, don't want this reverb to be extremely long. And let's give it a sample. So typically I send the snare to a quick reverb just to give it some extra space. And instead of putting it directly on the snare, I'm just going to go ahead and send it to this one. So it's send C. So let's actually bring this up. I'll switch views so we can see it a little bit more clearly. So this is our snare track. I'm going to crank it up, and then we're going to listen to this effect on and off. I might actually increase the size a little bit. Pre-delay, which is the time of the reverb, just to get a little bit more of a tail. Let's give this a listen. So notice we can hear a little bit of a tail, nothing crazy, just for some kind of space, some more oomph, some more body to the snare. And what we're going to also do, and we can play around with this as we start mixing, but I'm just going to set it up for now. Notice how our snare sticks around a little bit longer with that verb. And we're going to go ahead and throw in another return track. And then I'm going to rename this snare long. Snare L for long. I'm going to make this white. And again, I'm just going to grab a normal reverb. But this one, we're going to make it long. So we're going to make the pre-delay even longer. Let's go ahead and leave that on. We're going to put a low cut. We're going to make this, leave the size pretty big. The stereo doesn't have to be that wide. Decay time, way bigger. Dry wet. And then this is the diffuse volume, the reflect volume. We're actually going to turn this up a little bit because we kind of want a huge reverb. And we're going to send a little bit of the snare to this. Not much, right? Just for that long tail to kind of have the snare stick around for longer. So I'm actually going to just solo the snare and this effect for now so we can hear it. Let's go to a part of the mix that's not so busy. And let's go ahead and solo the drums so we can hear it. So here's our drum group. Boom. Let's turn it up a little bit. We could turn up the volume of the effect by bringing this up. So you can hear that super long reverb tail. I'll crank it so we can hear it. Right, super big space. And we might not want that much volume or that much send, but it's set up for when we decide to mix it. And a combination of these two effects can really give you that balanced snare with a lot of body and a lot of tail to just give you that more impact. Another return track I usually use is, I'm going to rename it Para for parallel compression. Again, I'm going to make this white, and I'm going to reach for one of my favorite plugins. You can use any kind of saturator or heavy-handed compressor, but I'm going to go for Waves, and I'm going to go my SSL compressor, and we're going to take a stereo one, pop it on there. Get green, baby. Get green. Wait, let's get both cameras. Oh, this is the magic sauce that turns you into a superhuman. Oh, put some mint in there today. Good stuff. So, okay, we popped this compressor on the parallel compression return track. And I'm just going to put this on the pumping preset. Okay, and what this is going to do is it's going to destroy whatever we send to that track. So just by compressing it like crazy. But this is a great move for your kick, your snare, even your bass sometimes, even heavy guitars or vocals sometimes. If you want that extra oomph, that extra like energy, you can send part of the signal to that to really enhance it. So let me show you what this can do. So let's go ahead and do this. Let's solo the drums. They're soloed. And let's send the kick. So let's send the kick and the snare to this. And let's listen for the difference. Okay. Notice how much more energy we get with that on, and I'll turn on this effect on and off so we can hear the difference. So this is with the parallel compression on the kick and snare. I'll take it out. So notice how it gives us a lot more energy, a lot more power. And I like to have that set up for if once you get mixing and you're putting things together, if something starts to feel buried and you can't get it to stick out with compression and EQ, maybe just send a bit to the parallel compression to give that extra energy. All right, and a couple pro tips for mixing is one thing I highly recommend is to make sure your mix is mono compatible. Okay, so while you're mixing, you want to constantly be referencing your mix in mono to make sure that you have no phasing issues, because if your stereo imaging has phasing issues, when it gets collapsed to mono, a bunch of your volume is going to duck out, and a lot of people might listen to your mix in mono if they're listening on like shitty speakers or like some other source that's not the best listening environment. It might be in mono, and if your mix is not mono compatible, or when it's collapsed to mono it just sounds like garbage and doesn't sound the same, that's a fail. You don't want that to happen. So you want to make sure that your mix is mono compatible, and a great way to do that in Ableton is go into utilities, grab utility, throw this on your master bus, and then simply make this mono switch key mapped to something, right? Because if we hit this, it'll collapse our mix to mono because it's on the master bus, and then with it off, it does nothing. So I'm going to go to key map, and I'm going to hit the mono switch, and I'm going to hit 1. So now every time I hit 1, it will toggle the mono switch. So let's give that a go right now. So this is our mix in stereo. So notice how much volume disappears in mono. So what that's telling me is that we have some phasing issues that we have to deal with once we start mixing, because when we collapse to mono, let's see how much volume we're losing. That's actually a great way to check. So I'm going to open this up in the mixer view so we can see more of this meter, and let's see what we're kind of hitting. So kind of hovering around -14, -13, and I'm going to toggle the mono switch and see what happens. So we are losing a couple dB when we're collapsing to mono. So that to say is that we're going to be checking that a lot as we continue with this mix, and putting this on your master fader to be able to easily toggle. So whenever I'm anywhere on my session, I'm looking at a track, whatever it is, I can just hit one and listen to it in mono real quick for that quick feedback. Another thing I will recommend is, let's go to plugins, is some sort of stereo imager. So I'm pretty sure that iZotope makes a free one. Where is this thing? Ozone Imager 2. So I'm pretty sure you can find this for free, if I'm not mistaken. Let's go ahead and grab that and throw it on the master bus. And what this will allow you to do is we can solo various elements in our mix as we're starting to mix them together. And if your stereo image is too wide and there's phasing, it will tell you if there is too wide of a stereo image, and you might have to reduce the width of whatever tracks you have soloed to make it mono compatible. And this is extremely important to constantly reference and make sure that you don't have crazy phasing going on, because again, when your mix is collapsed to mono, some of your elements will completely disappear and the balance will be completely off from what you intended. And I should mention that usually if I'm working on a track with vocals, I will also make another 2 return tracks for vocal slapback delay and a vocal reverb of some sort as well, just for the vocal, because I typically like to have vocal effects that are only affecting the vocals, so you can have really granular control on what's happening with the vocal on top of everything. However, this song doesn't have a vocal, but we might play around with that kind of stuff with the guitar solo as we move forward. So the whole idea with this step of the mixing phase is to just set up all the tedious technical stuff that you need, so that when you're in the heat of the moment of mixing and changing volumes and messing around with effects and all that kind of stuff, that you don't lose flow state and that you've set it up ahead of time. Also, if you happen to have hardware gear such as a compressor or whatever it may be, you want to set up the routing now so that when you're mixing, you can just turn a knob and send it to your hardware or whatever it is. And hey, if you're just getting started with music production and feeling completely overwhelmed by the whole process, or if you've been at this for a while but you're having trouble finishing tracks, or hey, if you just want to get a glimpse inside my personal workflow, I've created a super easy to follow 7-step framework that helps you go from your very first ideas all the way to a finished mix and master, and it's super handy to have around the studio as a printout. So if you're interested in grabbing that, you can find it in the description box below. If you're following along with your own mix, before you move on to the next video, make sure that you've grouped your tracks, make sure that you've created your return tracks and put whatever effects you want to play around with on there. Make sure you put something on your master fader so you can check mono compatibility really quick. And if you feel like grabbing Ozone's Imager plugin, throw that on your master bus so you can check your stereo image whenever you need to. All right, so if you got value out of this video, give me a thumbs up. If you want to stay in tune for the next video in this series, the next Metamind Music transmission, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And hey, let me know, are you following along with your own mix? Do you approach your mixes like this? Did you learn something? I'd love to know in the comments below. And until the next video, we'll see you in the next one.